Hi, I'm Madison, welcome back to my channel. Today I have my March wrap up. So I'm very excited to have a March wrap up. I read some freaking stellar books in the month of March. It is actually nuts. Like some of my favorite books of this year have been read in March. It's nuts. So I read 12 books in the month of March. 6 of them were physical books and 6 of them were ebooks. There were 3 new adult books and 9 adult books. We had 2 historical romances, 2 reverse harems, 1 motorcycle club romance, 1 mafia romance, and 6 contemporary romances. And for my total page count for the month, it was 4,127 pages. Nice. So as per normal, I'm going to be starting with my lowest rated book and working up to my highest rated book. And for this month, my lowest rated book is it 2.5 stars? I don't want to say that because that sounds really awful for this book, and like I feel bad giving it a 2.5. But then I read other books and I was like, oh, this is a total 3 star. Like this is a 3 star. And I was like, well, compare this 3 star to this 3 star. I was like, this 3 star wasn't as good as this 3 star. So does that mean that this 3 star is like a 2.5 star? So anyway, that book, I feel so bad. That book is How to Be a Wallflower by Eloisa James. I just didn't like it as a historical romance. It's probably one of my least favorite historical romances that I've read. I mean, it's my first Eloisa James. I definitely want to try out more from her as an author because I do know that she has some really great books. This one just didn't work for me. This has Miss Cleopatra Lewis and Jacob Addison. So Cleo is an heiress, she has a lot of money, her family comes from money, and so she doesn't really have to worry about marrying because of that. And she is about to debut into society and she refuses to do that because she doesn't actually want to get married. And so she decides to use this costumer, this lady who makes costumes, and she decides to use her to make these really awful outfits so that she doesn't have to debut into society and everyone would look at her and be like, oh my god, she's so ugly, why would we ever want to marry her? The only problem is that when she goes to this costume lady, she ends up learning that there is someone trying to buy out the costume place and is trying to then move them all to America, and they don't want to go. And so Cleo is like, oh, I'll just buy you out instead, and then you guys can stay here. Like, you guys seem like amazing people. This is a woman-owned business, and I want to support that. The guy who's trying to buy out the business is Jacob Addison, and Jacob Addison is not happy that Cleo has just swooped in under his nose and tried to take the costume place from him. And so he comes in and he's like trying to like woo Cleo to get this business back from her, and then ends up falling in love with her in the process. It was fine. It's just the fact of like, he fell for her so quickly, like out of nowhere. He's just like, I'm in love with you. And I'm like, sir, what? How? When? Why? What? There was no depth to their romance. And like, I appreciate the plot. I appreciate everything that was in this. It was definitely more of like a historical romance that was really focusing on everything else other than the romance that was going on in it. I honestly can't even remember what I didn't like 100% about this because I don't even remember. Next we have my 3-star read, and that is going to be Tutoring the Player by Rebecca Jenshak. This is my second Rebecca Jenshak book. Both of the ones that I've read from her that are new adult sport romances have been this typical trope of bad girl, good guy. And it just doesn't totally work for me as much anymore in the new adult genre. I feel like it's just something I just keep seeing and it just keeps being reused and reused. I mean, it's a common trope, nothing wrong with the trope. It's not working for me anymore in new adult romances. And so Daisy is like a wallflower. She and her friends, they aren't really well known in like college. They haven't really done much. They've just kind of like been sitting on the sidelines, and she's super smart and she's in physics class with Jordan and his friend Liam, and she has always had a crush on Liam. And so she's kind of like trying to get on Liam's good side, kind of like trying to be with Liam, trying to get the confidence to talk to him. And then she ends up falling instead for Jordan, and Jordan ends up falling for her, and Jordan ends up actually asking her to tutor him in classes because he pretends that he doesn't know how to do stuff. And she's like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, I'll tutor you. And then they end up falling in love that way. So it's very cute. You know, you got the typical hockey stuff in this. You have the partying, you have the fake tutoring kind of situation, which is super, super cute. Jordan is adorable. I loved how he like kind of groveled towards the end and how he tried to make things up to her. But I will say I didn't really love why they broke up. I just felt like Daisy, in my opinion, was just a bit too immature at times to me. I wasn't able to connect to Daisy, and because of that, that's where this fell flat, because I loved Jordan as a hero. He was so amazing and he was just so phenomenal, and she was just kind of like 50-50 for me, which is why this is like a 3 out of 5. You know, when you don't vibe with one of the main characters, it does tend to like ruin a romance for you. But I still really love Rebecca Jenshak's writing style, and I do love the way that she does her sex scenes as well. They're not like too smutty of books. There's like 1 or 2 things in here, but they're so cute, really adorable romances. And just, you know, if you're looking for a solid new adult hockey romance, like, you do want to just check out her books for sure. For my 3.5 star read, we have To Marry and to Meddle by Martha Waters. Yeah, I mean, this could be like a 3-star too, to be quite honest with you. So this is about Lady Emily Turner and her marriage convenience with Lord Julian. Now this is book 3 in this series. Lady Emily, she's really well known in society. She's like just a complete and utter diamond, but she's also a wallflower. No one really wants to marry her because her family is in deep, deep debt. And so her dad is like going to like kind of marry her off to this like awful, awful dude. Then you have Lord Julian. He is revered in society, but is also like a total rake, and he's not really well loved because of the fact that he owns a theatre, a very bawdy theatre. So even though he is a lord, people look down on him because he owns a bawdy theatre, and they're like, you're not really part of society for that, like you're not high class. So they enter a marriage of convenience so that Lady Emily can then boost him up, and that people will then see his bawdy theatre as something that's like more high class society. And for her, it's to get her out of her debts, and he's going to pay off the debts to the family so she doesn't have to worry about this creepy old dude. And so it's their romance. It did definitely give me Devil in Winter vibes by ḽᴏᴏᴏ. The only difference is that around the halfway point, things just slow down a bit too much. And it just kind of gets to the point where I'm just kind of like, there's like always a lull in her stories that always ends up happening. And you know, when that happens, my attention just kind of wanes. And honestly, towards the end, I was getting a bit annoyed with Lord Julian because he was like, oh, I can't be with her. I can't be with her. I can't be with her. And I'm like, what? Why? Because he's like so set on his dad the entire time and proving his dad wrong. And honestly, I get really annoyed in historical romances when the guys are always like having daddy issues. Daddy issues are really beginning to become the bane of my existence in historical romances because they 50% of the time are just always way too drawn out. And the entire book, the guy is just like, I can't love you because of my dad, or I'm too preoccupied with my dad. My dad comes first. And I'm like, I'm so sick of your dad. But yeah, so that ended up annoying me, but I did love their romance. Their romance was super cute. Their first time together was so adorable. Definitely a bit of a steamier one. It's super cute. I love them together. But yeah, it was just like a 3.5 star for like a historical romance, like a standard one. Not like a favorite of mine, but you know, still an enjoyable read. And especially I read this after Eloisa James's book, and this one was just way better. Okay, moving on to my 4-star read. So getting a bit better here. I'm going to start with the Ruthless Royals duet by Amanda Richardson. This is a reverse harem duet. I'm just going to lump them together. I read them both separately and I counted them as separate books, but you can buy a bind up of the duet, which I'm showing here. I enjoyed this. The first book in the duet was like a 3.5 and the second one was like a 4, so I kind of just rounded it out to a 4 because I don't really care, and I think it was super fun and I had a blast and a half reading it. Now, I do want to say it's a little bit weird because one of the guys in the harem is her stepbrother. Okay? And I know that's you know, that can be an issue sometimes, and sometimes it can be a bit weird. And I mean, it wasn't like awful or anything. I think my biggest issue with this was, I mean, the stepbrother thing took me a hot second to get over that. But the really big issue was at the very beginning, like with book 1 in this duet, there is a scene where like in the very beginning of the book, like probably the first 25% there, it's like a bully romance, like the 3 guys are bullying her. And it wasn't like bullying in the way that like I enjoy. That sounds awful. It wasn't good bullying, you know? But it really wasn't. It wasn't the kind of bully romance that I liked, and I think it's because I don't gravitate towards bully romances and things like this when they're high school, and this being set in high school and being so high school focused. I mean, they're step siblings in high school. It's a bully romance in high school. They steal her shirt and she walks around the school campus in just her bra and then her skirt. She's in high school. How is that legal? There was just a couple of things where I feel like had this have been maybe based in college, it would have been fine. But there were just so many things that I wasn't able to suspend my disbelief for some of the things that were going on, considering that they were still in high school. And I think that's where the crux of this comes down to. Now, that being said, this is a really hot and steamy, really hot and steamy deliciousness, reverse harem romance. A little bit poly towards the end, I feel like too, because 2 of the guys are bi. But yeah, the steamy scenes in this were deliciousness, so good. There's a camping scene, they all go camping, and you know what happens when 4 guys and 1 girl goes camping? A lot of steamy times. Oh, it was delicious. There is trigger warning in this for sexual assault, rape. It's trigger warning for rape. Her and her mum move, even though like her mum obviously married this guy, she's now step siblings with one of the boys, but they move because of the fact that her mum's ex-boyfriend raped her. And she ended up stabbing him. He almost died. He's then in jail. and then he ends up escaping from jail is kind of what this is. Like, that's the underlying plot to this duet. So do know that is a huge part of this. So if that is a trigger for you, please be aware of that, because it does play a huge part, because she does go to therapy and she's a therapist that she talks to, and it's her kind of like reclaiming her sexuality and things like that as well. So if that is something that you are sensitive to, it is quite a large part of this book. So I do want to point that out. But I have to say my favorite guy was Samson. Samson was a babe and a half. Samson was my favorite guy in the reverse harem. There's always one guy that you favor over the others. Samson also has a pierced sword. I find pierced swords so interesting in books, and I feel like they always show up in reverse harems. You never just have like a one-on-one like hetero single like male-female relationship where the guy has a pierced sword. The pierced swords always come in if it's like poly or reverse harem. Like, that's when there's always one guy who has one or gets one. It's always a thing. It's always a thing. It's always very interesting. It's always very interesting. Madison fact of the day. The other 4 out of 5 star book is going to be The Savage by Sophie Lark. This is book 5 in the Kingmaker series. This is Sabrina and Adric's story. This takes place after the first 4 books. It's a completely different arc. It's a total standalone, but there might be like a couple spoilers for what does happen in the first 4 books. So I do recommend that you read everything in the correct order, which I do have linked up here. I have a Sophie Lark reading order, which I highly recommend, because I have had friends who don't follow the reading order and then don't love the books as much, or they don't follow the reading order, then read the other books out of order and then go, oh, I wish I read this in order. And I go, I told you to read it in order, and this is what happens when you don't listen to me, because I'm correct. I'm always right, and just trust me. Trust me. No one ever listens. It's so annoying. Rant over. I think this was a super fun one. This one does drill very heavily with drugs and the mafia, and like, you know, creating designer drugs and sex and drugs and drugs and drugs and drugs. So if drugs is at all a problem for you, please know that's a heavy part of this. Sabrina is the daughter of Netta and Camille from the Brittle Birthright series, and Adric is the son of Dom and Lada from the Underworld series, and this is their romance. There is an age difference between them, but only by a couple of years, and what ends up happening is Adric ends up bringing Sabrina with him to Russia as like his co-partner to kind of start his own like mafia empire, his own mafia empire in Moscow. And so they're co-partners, you know, at the same time they're lovers, and so it's a huge dynamic thing that's going on between them. They're both alphas. I like to call this an Icarus romance. They're both basically Icarus, which, you know, can end with them both going down in flames, which does happen. They do burn each other, and there are aspects of the relationship that can be a little bit toxic, and it's them kind of working through all these things. I love Sabrina. She was just such a really cool badass heroine. I thought she was so amazing because she really reclaims her sexuality. She's someone who is so proud of who she is. She is a bi heroine, by the way. There is a threesome scene in this, and also some female scenes as well. These two aren't monogamous in any sense. They are definitely like an open relationship kind of a couple as well. I had a lot of fun reading it. I was so action-packed, and I love action in my mafia romances. They had really great banter. Sabrina's just such a badass, and I just freaking love her. She's also someone who uses her looks and her sexuality also as like an armor to kind of get people to like not take her too seriously and not realize that she has all these brains behind her as well. So she was just freaking awesome. Didn't love Adric as much as I could have. He was a bit not like my favorite hero that I've read about in Sophie's books. So yeah, 4 out of 5 stars. Moving on to my 4.5 star read, that is going to be Good Gone Bad by Giana Darling. This is book 3 in the Fallen Men series. This follows a motorcycle club called the Fallen Men based out of Canada. This is Harley Rose's story. She is the daughter of the Fallen Men president, and this is her age. All of Giana's books are age gaps, but this is her forbidden kind of Romeo and Juliet-esque romance between her and this officer, this police officer. And it's the two of them infiltrating a different motorcycle club and kind of trying to bring them down. And it's very, very action-packed. This is her most action-packed book, in my opinion, out of all of them, because they are actively trying to take down this motorcycle club while being inside of it and having this forbidden romance while they're inside this motorcycle club. And there is also triggers in this for sexual assault and attempted rape, because at the very beginning of this book, what sparks everything is that her current boyfriend tries to assault her and she ends up killing him. But I love this so much. I love Danvers and Harley Rose. HR is just such a fun heroine to follow, and her journey in this was so beautiful, and I love the two of them together. Everything that they did made sense. Everything was just so amazing and beautiful. I think there was like 1 or 2 scenes that I was kind of like meh about, that kind of like, okay. What really stood out to me though in this is that they do have in the bedroom a dom-sub relationship, and The difference with this one is that compared to some of the other dom-sub books I've read, there was like a lot of conversation in this about what it means to be in a dom-sub relationship and kind of the, like what that actually entails and what that means in that aspects, and he really talks to her about it. He talks about what that means to him, and I thought that was really nice because you don't always see that in your books. Sometimes they don't really take too much time to kind of talk about the safety of it and kind of the importance of everything, and so that was really looked after in this book. There are also just some really cute scenes between the two of them. They're just so adorable, and like you can just tell that they were like made for one another, and their passion, their romance, the tension between them was just so palpable, and I just adored the crap out of them. I adored them. This is a very heartbreaking romance at the same time because of all the tensions going on, but it was super cool. Okay, let's move on to my 5-star reads. I'm so excited because I actually just opened a package right before this, and one of the 5-star books just came in, and that is oh god, this is gonna be super shiny. That is The Four Leaf by I can't say Lee's last name, jacquot. But this is a novella, as you guys can see. It's super, super short. I'm like literally dying because in the very beginning of this, she wrote, I don't know if you guys can read it, but it says, Madison, I'll give you a 30-second head start. Go. Adrian. And I literally got chills. I got chills and I swooned. Oh my god, this book. Oh my god, I love this. But this is obviously this is one of her Holy Night novellas, so it's set during one of the holidays in the US, so this is set during St. Patrick's Day. And we have Adrian and Samantha. They have been best friends for years, and when she was 11 years old, she tried to kiss him and he ended up pushing her into the mud, and so that was like a rejection, and now it's been like a solid like 15 years later. They're still best friends. She still harbors this huge crush on him but doesn't think it's ever going to go anywhere, and it turns out that Adrian actually does, like, he's always crushed on her too, and this is like their romance kind of like coming to fruition and then finally like accepting that they had this like intense chemistry between them. The huge part of this is that there is a primal kink in it. Now, if you don't know what primal kink is, I didn't know either. I have now decided I love the primal kink, and I will read any books that have primal kink now in it because it's basically hide and seek, but sexy. Sexy hide and seek. Sexy tag your it. Any of those children's games where you gotta run away and hide and shit, it's that, but sexual. So imagine, got Adrian. I was watching something the other day to do with boxing, and now whenever I hear Adrian, I just think of, anyway. Let's not think of that, anyway. Thinking of Rocky now. You got Adrian. I don't feel like I'm going crazy. You got Adrian, and he's like chasing after Samantha, and they're like going through like all of Boston Commons and Boston, like into the woods, and he's chasing her and like trying to capture her, and then captures her, and then they get the sexies, and it's like, it's actually really hot. I was like, this is really hot. I didn't know this was a hot thing, but I definitely love it. So that's what the primal kink is. And that's what this is about. I mean, like, it's like 100 pages. Like, I'm not going to give you guys more information than that, but I highly, highly recommend it. Such a total 5-star novella. Bam. Then we have The Fine Print by Lauren Asher. This was actually just talked about this in my last reading vlogs. If you haven't checked that out, please do. But this is book 1 in the Dreamland Billionaires trilogy. Only the first 2 books are out for now. But you have Rowan and Zara. Rowan is one of 3 brothers. They are kind of the heirs to this, basically like a Disney empire. So like the Disney streaming service, Disney movies, Disney World, Disneyland, like that is basically what they are like the heirs to, is like a conglomerate like that. And so when their grandfather passes away, the grandfather leaves a will that says in order for them to inherit their shares, they must each complete a task. And so Rowan's task is that he has to become the creative director of the theme park for 6 months and make a huge change. And this is a huge deal for him because he kind of stopped being creative many years ago because his dad thought it was like kind of like a pansy thing to do and didn't think that he was like a proper man because he was into the arts and stuff. And so he kind of like stopped being creative because of that and kind of like shut that part of himself down. So then you have Zara, and she's currently working in like the Princess Castle, and she really loves it there, but she really wants to be a creator. She wants to be someone who like makes the rides at the park and like comes up with these really cool things. And so it is their romance. It's because she ends up joining the creators team and kind of like helping come up with ideas to help him with like, you know, his goal. And it's the 2 of them falling in love. It was just such a fun time. I literally felt like there was like an IV of serotonin going into my body as I was reading this book. I was laughing out loud the entire time. I was smiling, I was giggling. I was just like rolling on the floor. This was so funny. The humor in this is so up my alley. It was just such a great time. And like the sexual tension between the 2 of them. Oh, the sexual tension was delicious. Oh, it was so good. And like, it also like gives me like huge K-drama vibes too, because like, he's like obviously like trying to like hit on her, he wants to be with her, but he's like this billionaire, like he doesn't really know what he's doing, and so like he'll do like the most like outrageous things to like win her affections. And I'm like, sir, I feel like this is like a hyped romance, and I definitely want to tell you guys, like, even though it's like a hyped romance, because I see this like all the time on Book Talk, it's actually really, really worth it. And I'm someone who is also refuses to go into hype. Like, I avoid these kind of books so much, but I decided to do this one, and I'm so glad I did. Like, I read it on my Kindle, and then I went and purchased it physically because I loved it that much. I was like, I want a physical copy. Do want to say though, there is triggers in this for emotional abuse because of Rowan's dad. There's also Zara. There's also triggers in this for mental health and depression. There's also huge grumpy sunshine. Zara shits rainbows. It's so funny because he's like the ultimate grump and she's like the ultimate sunshine character. It's so hilarious. Zara is also European Armenian, by the way, and her younger sibling does have Down syndrome. So there's also a part of this, but yeah. Next we have The Confidence of Wildflowers by Micalea Smeltzer. You guys know I love this book. I literally died reading this book. If you guys saw my reading vlog for this, I am going to leave my review for this book in the description box down below because there is a trigger warning for this book that I don't want to spoil by saying it, but it is a trigger. If death of a loved one is a trigger for you, please check out my description box trigger warning because I don't want to say it here, but it is a huge trigger. This is a small town age gap forbidden romance. You have Salem, she's 18, and then you have her brand new grumpy neighbor next door, Thea, who is like 31, and he is a single dad, and he ends up hiring Salem to be his nanny part-time for when his son comes over and like visits. And he is super, super grumpy. Salem is currently in a relationship with her boyfriend, but things aren't going well, and it is the two of them falling in love over the course of this book. This is book one in a duet. So it does end off on a huge, huge cliffhanger. This is a super, super angsty and emotional book. It starts off really lighthearted, and then the last 20% will literally stab you in your heart, rip your heart out, run over it, pick up those runned over pieces, chuck it into a blender, and then pour down the drain into like an incinerator. It will break you. It will kill you. It'll be the death of you. But I still really, really love this book despite all that. I love this book. And I feel like so many people are going to read this because of my recommendation and literally hate me. I love the two of them together. They were just so beautiful, and Salem was so amazing because she also grows over the course of this book and kind of learns who she wants to be because she's kind of just like always lived her life. I do want to say there is a trigger warning in this also for childhood sexual abuse because her dad did abuse her. He is dead at the start of this book. He has passed away, but she is still very much dealing with that trauma and dealing with everything that she went through that, and still has nightmares. So it is very hard-hitting in that sense. There are a lot of like just dark and emotional topics to do with this, but at the crux of it is like this very beautiful blooming romance that is like growing throughout the course of this book, and just like you want these two to be together so much. And I just feel like if you want like a super angsty, super emotional, super hard-hitting romance, please pick this one up. Okay, we got two more books left, and they're both Corinne Michaels. So this, let's see, which one do I want to talk about first? Let's do Return to Us. This is book one of the Willow Creek Valley series. This is a series that does take place after the Arrowwood series. So the events of this book do overlap slightly with the last Arrowwood brother book, but it is not necessary to have read them at all prior to this book. You just kind of get to see the cool cameos, which I love seeing character cameos. So it's my preference to read everything in order, but like I said, you can go into this without having read the last book or any of the Arrowwood brother books at all. This is Grayson and Jessica's book. So Grayson and Jess were high school sweethearts, but you know, they did come from totally two classes. She's very poor and he was like the richest family in their town, and so she ended up breaking off with him before she went off to college, and it's been like 15 years since then, and she ends up getting into a plane crash. She's a flight attendant. She gets to a plane crash and ends up being really damaged from it. She has to go through physical rehab. She gets a traumatic brain injury, and she ends up not being able to, she has to do speech therapy and speech rehab too because she's unable to even speak her words properly anymore. And so she's come back to her small town because of that, and it's the two of them rekindling their romance, and he is a single dad at this as well. And so it is such a beautiful romance. Like from the second I started this book, I was shipping them. I wanted them to be together. Like, Corinne does some of the best second chance romances, in my opinion. And I just really loved how everything was built upon from when they were like high school sweethearts, because like they held on to so many of their like mementos, memorabilia, and like memories from when they had been together. And you just knew the entire time you were reading this, like they were meant to be, that like there was never ever going to be anyone else for them but each other. And even though they had all these years apart and got to meet all these different people, like they found their way back to one another. And even though it was like through like a tragic accident and kind of like falling in love again that way. This does have, I just want to say, it does have accidental pregnancy in it, if that does bother you, but I actually like the accidental pregnancy in this one, and I'm very picky about my accidental pregnancies in standalone books, but I liked it in this one, and it worked for me. So Ta-da! Then we have The One For Me by Corinne Michaels. This is book 3 in the Arrowwood Brothers series. Like I just said, you know, you want to read each of her series like in order. So you want to read the Arrowwood Brothers in order, the Willow Creek like things in order, just because it just has a better effect on everything. I'm also just someone who's annoying as hell and likes to read shit in order. I know that like not everyone does that, but I do. But this is a friends to lovers romance, and it's so funny. I picked this book up back in December 2021, and I think I got like 60 pages in and just wasn't really feeling it at the time, so I put it down. And then like a couple of weeks ago, back in, you know, when I decided to pick this up, I picked it up on a whim, and I fell in love with it and read it in like one night. I am so kicking myself, because if I just read like an extra 30 pages, I would have fallen in love, because that's when everything started to happen between the two of them. And like this book is like the book that has taught me that like I can love friends to lovers romances. This is Sean and Devney's book. You have seen them throughout. You've seen Devney throughout all the books up until now, and Sean's a baseball player in Miami, and Devney obviously works as the legal assistant to the heroine in book 2 of the Arrowwood Brothers series, and he ends up, you know, coming back to town because this series is based on the Arrowwood brothers. In their dad's will, it stipulated that each of the brothers had to spend 6 months on the farm in order to inherit the farm. And so they obviously wanted to sell the farm because their dad was an abusive, alcoholic piece of shit, and they don't want any ties to it. So they want to sell it, so they each have to come back to town for 6 months in order to do that. And so Sean's back in town despite, you know, being this major baseball player, and you know, they end up rekindling their romance when they end up kissing at the start of this book, and that like kind of sparks their entire romance. Now this does have the secret baby trope in it. I always feel weird saying when there's like secret baby or accidental pregnancy in books, because I do feel like it's a bit of a spoiler, but I also know that there are some people who just don't like it or need to know beforehand. Because like I actually don't like to know if those two things are in a book. I prefer just to go into it and it to happen. But I know that there are people who do prefer that, and it's just something I really struggle with that when I'm explaining books, but this does have that in it. And so yeah, it's their romance. It is so beautiful. Sean is like probably one of my favorite heroes that I have read in my entire life. Sean is just so swoon-worthy and so amazing, and like his love for Devney is just so phenomenal. Like when he realizes, like they've been best friends since they were kids, and it's not until they kiss that he's like, oh my god, I'm in love with you. The reason why I've always had these flings with girls and never like actually pursued anything is because I have been in love with you this entire time, and I just haven't been able to realize it. Now that I know that I'm in love with you, I'm not going to let you go, and I'm going to do everything in my power to be with you. And he's just so phenomenal. He's so phenomenal. The things he does for Devney, my heart was melting. Yeah, that's it. That is my March wrap up. Freaking loved so many of these books, and yeah, that's gonna be it. If you guys did enjoy this video, please hit the like button down below. If you want to see more of me, please go to my channel, and until next time, thanks a bunch everyone. Bye bye.